They tried to write her out of the story before it even began. A so-called WNBA analyst sat behind a microphone on January 1st and made a prediction so wild, so disconnected from reality that it left the basketball world absolutely stunned. Jordan Robinson didn't just offer a hot take. She attempted to rewrite Caitlin Clark's future, declaring with full confidence that the Indiana Fever superstar would skip the 2026 World Cup. Not might skip would skip, as if she had some inside line to Clark's mind that nobody else possessed. Here's the problem. Caitlin Clark had literally just said the exact opposite. 24 hours earlier, Clark sat down for the New Heights podcast and laid out her international basketball dreams with crystal clarity. Her words weren't vague. They weren't uncertain. They were a direct, passionate declaration of exactly what she wanted. The 2026 World Cup, the 2028 Olympics, all of it. She wanted every single opportunity to wear USA across her chest. But apparently that didn't matter. Robinson's prediction painted a scenario where Clark would make the World Cup roster, then decline the invitation to rest for the Indiana Fever's playoff run. A strategic move. She called it a calculated decision to prioritize a WNBA championship over representing her country on the global stage. It was presented as insight, as analysis, as some kind of informed forecast about what Clark would choose when the moment arrived. Except Clark had already chosen. The audacity wasn't just in getting it wrong. It was in speaking over an athlete who had already spoken for herself. This wasn't debate about what Clark should do. She'd already told us what she would do. Yet, here was a media member constructing an entirely different narrative, as if Clark's own words were somehow less reliable than an analyst's speculation. And this is where it gets deeper than just one bad prediction. This moment exposes something broken in how we cover women's basketball. How easily the voices of the athletes themselves get drowned out by people who think they know better. How a clear statement of ambition can be dismissed, reframed, or outright contradicted by someone who's never played a minute of professional basketball. Caitlin Clark spent her entire rookie season proving doubters wrong, shattering records and redefining what's possible. Now she's fighting a different battle. The battle to control her own narrative. Because when Robinson made that prediction, she wasn't just forecasting a decision. She was attempting to impose one. To box Clark into a narrative where international competition takes a back seat to club success, where representing Team USA becomes optional, where clearly stated dreams somehow don't align with what an analyst thinks she'll actually do. But here's what Robinson missed. Caitlin Clark doesn't speak in May. When she sat down for that New Heights podcast on December 31st, just one day before Robinson's prediction went live, she didn't dance around the subject. She didn't leave room for interpretation. Host Travis Kelce asked about her international basketball aspirations, and Clark delivered an answer that should have ended all speculation before it even started. The training camp kind of kicks off the next cycle for preparing for the Olympics, Clark explained, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd already mapped out the next 4 years of her career. She wasn't talking about the World Cup as some standalone event. She was describing it as an essential stepping stone, a critical piece of a much larger puzzle that ends in Los Angeles in 2028. This wasn't casual conversation. This was blueprint. Clark went further, addressing the exact concern Robinson would later use as justification for her prediction. The scheduling conflict, the supposed impossible choice between WNBA playoffs and international duty. Clark dismantled it with single sentence. The WNBA season would actually pause the World Cup, mirroring the structure used the Olympics. Read that again. The league would pause. There was no conflict, no impossible decision, no dramatic choice between wearing a Fever jersey or a USA jersey. The infrastructure was already in place. The league had already prioritized international competition. Clark knew it. USA Basketball knew it. The WNBA knew it. Apparently, Jordan Robinson didn't. But even that logistical clarity wasn't the most powerful moment of the interview. When Clark spoke about actually making the 2026 World Cup roster, her tone shifted. "Hopefully, I'm on the team for that," she said. "Not if I decide to accept. Not we'll see what makes sense. Hopefully, I'm on the team." The language of someone who understands that making Team USA isn't a given. It's earned. It's competitive. It's something she actively wants to fight for. This is where Robinson's prediction goes from inaccurate to insulting. Because it's not just about getting the facts wrong. It's about fundamentally misunderstanding who Caitlin Clark is as a competitor. This is someone who walked into the WNBA as the most scrutinized rookie in league history and responded by breaking the single-season assist record. Someone who faced physical defenses, constant double teams, and relentless media pressure, and still led her team to the playoffs for the first time in years. You think that person is going to turn down the chance to compete on the world's biggest stage? Clark even acknowledged the magnitude of the World Cup, noting that it's been almost harder for us to win because there's more teams that play in the World Cup than teams qualify for the Olympics. She wasn't minimizing it. She was recognizing its prestige, its difficulty, its value as a proving ground for the best players in the world, and she wanted in. But Robinson's narrative required Clark to be someone else entirely, someone who would prioritize rest over glory, someone who would view international competition as optional, someone who would make strategic calculations that contradicted everything she'd publicly stated about her goals. The prediction wasn't bold. It was fiction. And the basketball world noticed immediately. The backlash was immediate and relentless. Social media erupted with a single unified question. Did Jordan Robinson even listen to the same podcast the rest of us heard? WNBA fans, Clark supporters, and even casual basketball observers couldn't comprehend how an analyst could make such a definitive prediction when the athlete in question had just said the complete opposite. It wasn't a difference of opinion. It was a contradiction of observable reality. But this goes beyond one analyst getting one prediction wrong. This is about a pattern, a disturbing trend in sports media where the voices that matter least speak the loudest, while the voices that should matter most get buried under layers of speculation, hot takes, and manufactured controversy. Caitlin Clark had given us her truth. Clear, direct, unambiguous, and within 24 hours, someone decided that truth wasn't interesting enough. So they invented a better story. A story where Clark faces an agonizing decision. Where she must choose between country and club. Where her commitment to Team USA hangs in the balance, dependent on playoff seeding and championship aspirations. It's dramatic. It's compelling. It's completely made up, and it's dangerous. Because when you're Caitlin Clark fighting to establish yourself not just as a great WNBA player, but as a cornerstone of Team USA's future, these narratives matter. They shape perception. They influence conversations happening in rooms you're not in. They create doubt where none should exist. Clark didn't just talk about the 2026 World Cup in that podcast. She went further, stating her ultimate goal with the same clarity and conviction. My goal is to be on the Olympic team for 2028, the Olympics, Los Angeles. For years away, but already locked in her sights. She even acknowledged the timeline, adding, "It feels like it's far away, but it's probably way closer than it sounds." This is someone thinking in cycles. Someone planning not just for next season, but for the next chapter of her career. Someone who understands that the path to Olympic gold runs directly through the 2026 World Cup. Now ask yourself, does that sound like someone who's going to skip the World Cup? Robinson's logic tried to frame Clark's potential absence as strategic. The Fever could be making a championship run. Clark would need to be fresh. Rest would be paramount. It's the kind of reasoning that might make sense for a veteran at the end of their career, someone who's already won internationally and is managing their body through the twilight years. Caitlin Clark just finished her rookie season. She's 22 years old. She's at the beginning of what could be a generational career. She's already stated on the record that international play is a priority. She's already explained that the league accommodates the World Cup schedule. She's already expressed hope that she makes the roster. What part of any of that suggests she's planning to decline? But here's what really makes this infuriating. Robinson didn't present her prediction as a possibility. She presented it as probability. I think she makes a roster, but declines the rest of the playoffs. Not she might, not it's possible. She framed it as a likely outcome, as if she possessed insight that contradicted everything Clark herself had said. That's not analysis. That's arrogance. And it reveals a fundamental disrespect for the athlete's own agency. Because embedded in Robinson's prediction is an assumption that she knows what's best for Caitlin Clark better than Caitlin Clark does. that despite Clark's stated ambitions, despite her clear commitment, despite her detailed explanation of how the logistics work, Robinson has identified the smarter path. The path Clark supposedly doesn't see yet, but will eventually choose. Except Clark already sees it. She's already chosen. She told us exactly what she wants. And what she wants is everything. Let's talk about what really happened here. This wasn't prediction gone wrong. This was someone deciding that an athlete's own words weren't as valuable as their opinion about what that athlete should do. And that distinction matters enormously, especially in women's sports where female athletes have spent decades fighting to be heard, respected, and taken seriously. Caitlin Clark has earned the right to define her own priorities. She spent her college career becoming the NCAA's all-time leading scorer, men's or women's. She entered the WNBA under a microscope of scrutiny that would have crushed lesser players. She faced physical play that bordered on targeting. She dealt with constant debates about whether her success was real or manufactured by hype. And she responded by setting the single-season assist record, leading all rookies in scoring and dragging the Indiana Fever to the playoffs. Every step of the way, she let her game speak. But apparently when she uses her actual voice to speak about her actual goals, that's not enough. Someone else needs to step in and correct the record, to explain what she really means, to predict what she'll really do when the pressure arrives. As if her track record of rising to every single challenge somehow doesn't apply to international competition. Here's what makes Robinson's prediction even more disconnected from reality. Caitlin Clark has already proven she thrives on big stages. The bigger the moment, the better she performs. March Madness. She put up performances that will be remembered for generations. WNBA playoffs in her rookie year. She averaged over 19 points and 8 assists against the Connecticut Sun, going toe-to-toe with championship-caliber competition. This is someone who seeks out pressure, not someone who runs from it. Yet, we're supposed to believe she'll turn down the World Cup, where she'd compete against the best players on the planet, where she'd represent her country on a global stage, where she'd build chemistry with Team USA ahead of the 2028 Olympics, where she'd add another chapter to her already legendary career. We're supposed to believe she'll look at that opportunity and say, "No thanks. I need to wrestle playoffs." It's absurd on its face, but let's examine Robinson's actual reasoning for a moment. She suggested that the timing in September, right as playoffs begin, would create a conflict, but Clark already addressed this. The lead pauses it's structured into the calendar. The WNBA, USA Basketball, and FIA have already coordinated to make this work, so that justification falls apart immediately. Robinson then suggested the Fever might be making a championship run, implying Clark would need to be fresh. But consider what that argument actually says. That Caitlin Clark, who has never shown any indication of fatigue-related decline, who played a grueling college schedule, an intense rookie WNBA season, suddenly can't handle a World Cup in playoffs. It's insulting to her conditioning, her preparation, and her competitive drive. And it ignores what international competition actually does for players. It elevates their game. Playing alongside and against the world's best doesn't drain you. It sharpens you. It exposes you to different styles, different schemes, different challenges that make you better when you return to league play. Ask a Wilson. Ask Breanna Stewart. Ask any player who's competed internationally while maintaining WNBA excellence. They don't view it as a burden. They view it as an honor. But perhaps the most telling part of Robinson's prediction was what it revealed about how some people view Caitlin Clark's priorities. There's an underlying assumption that she's singularly focused on WNBA success. That a championship with the Fever is the ultimate goal and everything else is secondary. Clark herself has shown us that's not true. Her goals are bigger. Her ambitions are broader. She wants the WNBA championship. Yes, but she also wants Olympic gold. She wants to be part of Team USA's legacy. She wants to compete on every stage basketball has to offer. Why would we expect anything less from someone who's already accomplished everything else she set out to do? The answer is we shouldn't. And the fact that Robinson did expect less reveals more about the analyst than it does about Clark. There's a bigger picture here that we need to address. Caitlin Clark isn't just fighting against one analyst's bad prediction. She's fighting against a media ecosystem that too often prioritizes controversy over accuracy, hot takes over homework, and speculation over substance. And in women's basketball, where the sport is finally getting the attention it deserves, this kind of reckless commentary can do real damage. Think about what Robinson's prediction actually accomplished. Created a story where none existed. It planted doubt about Clark's commitment to Team USA when zero doubt should exist. It forced a narrative into the conversation that Clark herself would eventually have to address, taking time and energy away from what actually matters, preparing for her second WNBA season and earning her place on the World Cup roster. This is a tax that elite female athletes pay. They don't just have to perform at the highest level. They have to constantly correct the record. They have to respond to speculation that contradicts their own stated intentions. They have to prove over and over again that their words mean what they say. It's exhausting and it's unfair. Consider the contrast with how male athletes are covered. When LeBron James says he wants to compete in the Olympics, nobody predicts he'll decline. When Stephen Curry expresses commitment to Team USA, it's taken at face value. Their words carry weight. Their stated intentions become the baseline for all future coverage. Nobody sits behind a microphone and says, "I think he'll make the roster, but turn it down." Yet, here's Caitlin Clark, fresh off one of the most impressive rookie seasons in WNBA history, explicitly stating her international basketball goals with passion and clarity. And within 24 hours, an analyst decide she knows better. The double standard is glaring. But let's go even deeper into why Robinson's prediction was so fundamentally flawed. Beyond logistical errors, beyond the disrespect to Clark's agency, there's a complete misread of what drives elite competitors. Caitlin Clark didn't become the NC's all-time leading scorer by taking an easy path. She didn't break the WNBA's single-season assist record by avoiding challenges. She didn't lead the Fever to the playoffs by making strategic calculations about rest and recovery. She did it by attacking every opportunity with everything she had. By refusing to back down, by treating every game, every possession, every moment as a chance to prove herself. That's not someone who skips the World Cup. That's someone who circles it on her calendar, who trains specifically for it, who views it as another mountain to climb on her way to becoming the best player in the world. The very suggestion that she'd opt out reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes Clark special in the first place. But there's another layer to this that often gets overlooked. International competition isn't just about individual glory. It's about legacy. It's about being part of something larger than yourself. It's about representing your country alongside the best players in the world and competing for something that transcends regular season records and playoff runs. Clark understands this. That's why she spoke about the World Cup and Olympics in the same breath. Journey from 2024 to 2028. The stepping stones that lead to Olympic gold. That's why she connected the training camp to the larger cycle of international competition. That's why she expressed hope that she'd make the roster, acknowledging that it's earned, not given. She sees the full picture. The journey from 2024 to 2028. The stepping stones that lead to Olympic gold. Robinson's prediction tried to shrink that picture to reduce Clark's ambitions to a binary choice between club and country. But Clark has already shown us that she operates in a different framework entirely. One where both are possible. One where excellence at every level isn't just a goal, but an expectation. And here's where things get particularly interesting. Let's talk about what Caitlin Clark actually said on that podcast. Not paraphrased, not summarized, not filtered through an analyst's interpretation. Her actual words delivered with a kind of conviction that leaves absolutely no room for misunderstanding. When discussing the 2026 World Cup, Clark didn't hesitate. "Hopefully, I'm on the team for that," she said. The word hopefully is important here. It's not arrogance. It's not assumption. It's the language of someone who understands that making Team USA is a competitive process. That even the best players have to earn their spot, that nothing is guaranteed. But it's also the language of someone who desperately wants it. There's a difference between saying, "We'll see what happens," and "hopefully I'm on the team." The first is passive, non-committal, open to interpretation. The second is active, Aspirational, a declaration of intent wrapped in appropriate humility about the selection process. Clark chose the second option, and that choice matters. She then expanded on why the World Cup is so significant, explaining that it's been almost harder for us to win because there's more teams to play in the World Cup than teams qualify for the Olympics. This isn't someone minimizing the tournament. This is someone who's done her homework. Someone who understands a competitive landscape. Someone who recognizes that the World Cup presents unique challenges that even the Olympics don't replicate. And she wants those challenges. That's the part Robinson completely missed. Clark wasn't describing the World Cup as an obligation. She was describing it as an opportunity. A chance to test herself against a broader field of international competition. A chance to prove herself on a different stage. A chance to add another accomplishment to a career already overflowing with them. But Clark didn't stop at the World Cup. She went further. My goal is to be on the Olympic team for 2028. She stated directly. Not it would be nice, not if things work out. My goal, active language, ownership language, the kind of declaration that leaves zero ambiguity about her intentions. Then came the line that tied it all together. It feels like it's far away, but it's probably way closer than it sounds. This is strategic thinking from a 22-year-old who's already proven she understands the long game. 4 years to the Olympics sound like an eternity. But Clark recognizes that the journey begins now. That the 2026 World Cup isn't just a standalone event. It's a proving ground, a resume builder, a chance to develop chemistry with potential Olympic teammates. Every piece connects. The December training camp in Durham, North Carolina wasn't just practice. It was the beginning of the next cycle. Clark participated alongside other current WNBA stars, building relationships and demonstrating her commitment to the national team program. She showed up. She competed. She made her intentions clear through actions, not just words. And then she made them clear through words, too. On that New Heights podcast, Clark laid out a comprehensive vision for her international career from the training camp to the World Cup to the Olympics from 2024 to 2028. A 4-year arc that she's already started building. A path that she's already committed to walking. So, when Jordan Robinson sat down on January 1st and predicted that Clark would skip the World Cup, she wasn't just getting the facts wrong. She was ignoring a detailed roadmap that Clark had already shared with the world. It's as if Robinson watched a GPS navigation system announce turn right in 500 feet and then predicted the driver would turn left. The information was right there, clear and unmistakable. But here's what makes this even more frustrating for fans who actually pay attention. The timing of Robinson's prediction wasn't just wrong. It was almost deliberately provocative. Think about the sequence of events. On December 31st, Caitlin Clark appears on one of the biggest podcasts in sports. She speaks passionately about her international aspirations. She explains the logistics of how the WNBA accommodates the World Cup. She expresses hope about making the roster and sets the 2028 Olympics as a primary goal. 24 hours later, Robinson goes live on Bleacher Report and predicts the exact opposite. This wasn't a prediction made in a vacuum. This wasn't speculation about something Clark had never addressed. This was a direct contradiction of statements that were less than a day old, fresh, current, immediately accessible to anyone with an internet connection and basic research skills. So what happened? Either Robinson didn't do her homework, which is embarrassing for someone paid to analyze basketball, or she did her homework and chose to ignore it, which is worse because that suggests a prediction wasn't about analysis at all. It was about generating controversy, creating content, manufacturing a debate where none should exist. Welcome to modern sports media, where the incentive isn't to inform, it's to inflame. Where accuracy takes a back seat to engagement. Where the most valuable currency isn't truth, it's attention. And nothing generates attention quite like a hot take that contradicts what everyone just heard. But here's what this kind of coverage costs. Costs athletes their peace. It forces them to address fabricated narratives instead of focusing on their craft. Creates noise that drowns out the actual story. And in women's basketball specifically, where the sport is fighting for every inch of respect and coverage it receives, it poisons the well. Caitlin Clark didn't need this distraction. She's preparing for her second WNBA season. She's working to build on a rookie year that exceeded every expectation. She's developing her game, studying opponents, strengthening her body for the physical demands of professional basketball. That's where her focus should be. That's where the conversation should be. Instead, she has to deal with speculation that she'll skip the World Cup based on nothing, contradicting her own words, creating a story from thin air. And the worst part, some people will believe it. That's the insidious nature of these predictions. Once they're out there, they take on a life of their own. They get shared, discussed, debated. People who didn't hear Clark's actual statements will hear Robinson's prediction and assume it's based on something real. Doubt gets planted. Narratives get shaped. By the time the truth catches up, the damage is already done. This is why the immediate pushback was so important. Why fans and observers called out the prediction for what it was. Fabricated nonsense that contradicted verifiable facts. Because if you let these narratives go unchallenged, they become accepted wisdom. They become the baseline for future coverage. They become what people are saying. Even when what people are saying is demonstrably false. Clark's words needed to be amplified. Her actual statements needed to be elevated above the speculation. And thankfully, that's exactly what happened. The basketball community rallied around the truth. They pointed to the New Heights interview. They quoted Clark directly. They demolished the logic behind Robinson's prediction piece by piece. They refused to let a false narrative take root. But it shouldn't require that kind of effort. Athletes shouldn't need an army of defenders to correct a record every time a media member decides to invent a storyline. Their own words should be enough. Their own statements should carry weight. When Caitlin Clark says she wants to play in a World Cup, that should end the conversation. Full stop. Yet, here we are dissecting why an analyst thought she knew better than the athlete herself. It's exhausting. It's unnecessary. And it reveals a fundamental dysfunction in how we cover sports. But there's something else going on here that deserves attention. Let's address the elephant in the room. Why would anyone predict that Caitlin Clark, of all people, would voluntarily skip a major international competition? What's the underlying logic? What assumption about her character, her priorities, or her ambitions would lead someone to that conclusion? The answer reveals something uncomfortable about how some people view her. There's a narrative that's been floating around since Clark entered the WNBA. A narrative that frames her as primarily a brand, a marketing phenomenon. Someone whose value lies more in her commercial appeal than her actual basketball ability. Someone who's here to grow the game, sure, but maybe not equipped to compete at the highest levels when it really matters. It's a narrative that ignores everything she's actually accomplished, but it persists in subtle comments about her playing style, in questions about whether she can handle physical defense, in speculation about her true priorities, and yes, in predictions that she'll skip the World Cup to focus on the WNBA playoffs as if international competition is somehow above her pay grade. Robinson's prediction fits neatly into this framework. It assumes that Clark will make a calculated business decision rather than a competitive one. That she'll prioritize her Fever brand over her Team USA opportunity. That when push comes to shove, she'll choose a safer, more commercially sensible path over the challenging, grueling reality of international competition. Except that's never been who Caitlin Clark is at Iowa. She didn't play it safe. She took ridiculous shots from the logo. She challenged defenders twice her size. She played with a chip on her shoulder the size of a basketball arena, constantly trying to prove that she belonged among the all-time greats. And she did prove it again and again and again. When she entered the WNBA, the skeptics said the game was different. Faster, more physical, single-season assist record. She made the All-Star team. More demanding. They said her college success wouldn't translate. They said the defenders would figure her out. They said reality would humble her. She averaged 19.2 points and 8.4 assists as a rookie. She broke the single-season assist record. She made the All-Star team. She led the Fever to the playoffs for the first time since 2016. She silenced every single critic who said she couldn't compete at the professional level. Now, we're supposed to believe she'll shrink from the World Cup. The pattern is clear. Caitlin Clark has spent her entire career defying expectations, proving doubters wrong. embracing challenges that others said she couldn't meet. That's not just her playing style, that's her identity. And international competition represents the ultimate test. Playing for Team USA isn't like playing for Iowa or Indiana. The stakes are different, the pressure is different, the competition is different. You're not just representing yourself or your school or your city. You're representing your entire country against the best players the world has to offer. For a competitor like Clark, that's not a burden to avoid. It's a challenge to embrace. It's exactly the kind of pressure she thrives under. The kind of stage where she elevates her game. The kind of moment where she proves once again that she belongs among the elite. And she knows it. That's why she spoke with such passion on the New Heights podcast. That's why she connected the World Cup to the Olympics. That's why she expressed hope about making a roster while acknowledging the competitive nature of the selection process. She wants this, all of it, not as a checkbox on a resume, not as a brand-building exercise, but as a genuine competitive challenge that will push her to become an even better player. Robinson's prediction missed all of this. It reduced Clark to a one-dimensional figure, making transactional decisions about her career. It ignored her competitive fire, her relentless drive, her proven track record of rising to every challenge. It got her fundamentally wrong. But this situation also raises important questions about the people responsible for actually selecting the team. Sue Bird is the managing director of USA Basketball's women's national team program. Let that sink in for a moment. One of the greatest point guards in basketball history is now overseeing the selection and development of Team USA. She's watched the evolution of the game from the court. She's competed at the highest levels. She's won 4 Olympic gold medals. She knows what it takes to succeed internationally, and she's been watching Caitlin Clark. At the December training camp in Durham, North Carolina, Bird had a front-row seat to Clark's abilities. She saw the court vision, the passing creativity, the competitive fire, the leadership qualities that have defined Clark since her Iowa days. She observed how Clark integrated with other elite players, how she communicated, how she competed. This is the context that matters when discussing Clark's international future. Not speculation from analysts who've never played at that level. Not predictions based on imagined conflicts between club and country, but the actual evaluation process led by someone who understands exactly what Team USA needs to succeed on the world stage. And here's what Bird and USA Basketball have consistently emphasized. They want the best players. Period. The 2024 Olympic team in Paris demonstrated this commitment. Diana Taurasi, I. Wilson, Brianna Stewart. The roster was stacked with talent because the goal wasn't politics or narrative management. The goal was gold, and they achieved it, continuing USA Basketball's remarkable streak of Olympic dominance. The 2026 World Cup roster will follow the same principle. If Caitlin Clark is among the best players available, she'll make the team. If her skills, her court vision, her scoring ability, and her competitive drive meet the standard, she'll wear USA across her chest. The process is designed to identify and select the most talented players regardless of what any analyst predicts about their willingness to participate. But here's where Clark's own statements become even more significant. By publicly declaring her commitment to international play, she's removed any doubt about her availability. She's told USA Basketball loud and clear that she wants to be considered, that she'll show up, that she'll compete, that representing her country is a priority, not an afterthought. That matters in selection discussions. When coaches and directors evaluate potential roster spots, they consider more than just on-court ability. They consider commitment, availability, willingness to sacrifice for the team. They want players who are Allen, not players who might decline when the moment arrives. Clark has answered that question definitively. Her podcast statements weren't just about shutting down false predictions. They were about signaling to USA Basketball that she's ready, that she understands a commitment, that she views international competition as an integral part of her career, not a distraction from it, smart, strategic, and completely consistent with how she's approached every other challenge in her basketball journey. Now, consider the alternative scenario Robinson predicted. In that version, Clark makes a World Cup roster, but declines the invitation. She tells USA Basketball that she'd rather rest for the Fever's playoff run. She steps away from international duty to focus on club success. What would that do to her relationship with the national team program? It would create doubt. It would raise questions about her commitment. It would potentially impact her standing for future selections, including the 2028 Olympics, she explicitly stated as her goal. It would damage relationships with coaches, directors, and teammates who are counting on full roster participation. Clark is too smart for that. She understands that international basketball isn't a one-time decision. It's a long-term commitment, a relationship built over years of training camps, competitions, and shared experiences. You don't build that relationship by declining opportunities when they arise. And she has no intention of declining. She's already told us that in her own words, with her own voice on one of the biggest podcasts in sports. The only people who seem confused about her intentions are the ones who weren't listening. This is about more than Caitlin Clark. This is about the future of women's basketball. When a generational talent like Clark expresses clear commitment to international play only to have that commitment questioned and contradicted by media speculation, it sends a message. It tells young players that their words don't matter, that their stated goals can be rewritten by anyone with a microphone, that no matter how clearly they articulate their dreams, someone else will always think they know better. That's not just wrong, it's damaging. Women's basketball is at an inflection point. Viewership is up. Attendance records are being shattered. Investment is flowing into sport at unprecedented levels. Players like Caitlin Clark are driving this momentum, bringing new fans to arenas and television screens around the world. But with that attention comes responsibility. The responsibility to cover these athletes accurately, to respect their voices, to report their actual statements rather than inventing alternative narratives, to treat them as the world-class competitors they are, not as characters and fabricated storylines designed to generate clicks. Jordan Robinson failed that responsibility by predicting that Clark would skip the World Cup despite Clark's explicit statements to the contrary. Robinson participated in the exact kind of coverage that holds women's sports back. The kind that prioritizes speculation over substance. The kind that treats female athletes as less reliable narrators of their own careers and the analysts who cover them. It's a pattern that needs to end because here's what actually matters. Caitlin Clark wants to play in the 2026 World Cup. She wants to compete for the 2028 Olympic team. She wants to represent Team USA on the world's biggest stages. She's told us this directly, clearly, and passionately. That should be the story. Not whether an analyst thinks she'll change her mind. Not speculation about conflicts that don't exist. Not predictions that contradict everything she said. The story should be about Clark's ambition, her drive, her commitment to excellence at every level of the game. And if we listen closely, that story tells us something remarkable. It tells us that Clark doesn't see limits on what she can achieve. She sees a WNBA championship and Olympic gold as compatible goals, not competing ones. She sees international play as a complement to her club career, not a distraction from it. She sees the next 4 years as an opportunity to cement her legacy across multiple dimensions of a sport. That's the mindset of a transcendent player. Someone who doesn't just want to be great in one arena. Someone who wants to dominate every arena. Someone who views each challenge as another chance to prove that the doubters, the skeptics, and yes, the analysts who make baseless predictions have fundamentally underestimated what she's capable of achieving. The 2026 World Cup will arrive soon enough. And when it does, when rosters are announced and Team USA takes the court, we'll see Caitlin Clark exactly where she says she hopes to be, wearing the red, white, and blue, representing her country on the global stage, proving once again that her words mean exactly what they say. No analyst's prediction will change that because Caitlin Clark doesn't let other people write her story. She writes it herself. One game, one tournament, one championship at a time. And the next chapter, despite what Jordan Robinson wants you to believe, will absolutely include the World Cup. She's already told us so. The only question now is whether the media will finally start listening or whether athletes like Clark will have to keep fighting for the basic right to have their own words respected and believed. In the end, Clark will do what she's always done. She'll show up, she'll compete, she'll excel, and she'll make everyone who doubted her commitment look as foolish as they've always looked when betting against Caitlin Clark. Because that's what champions do. They don't just prove their critics wrong. They make their critics irrelevant. And Caitlin Clark, she's just getting started.